A 2,200-year-old Roman ship pulled from the flow of the Adriatic Sea still carries a coating recipe that ancient writers described in words but archaeologists had rarely found intact. The wreck sat near the Croatian island of Ilovak since it sank sometime in the 2nd century BCE. Hauling a cargo of timber logs and clay storage jars called amphorae. Divers first spotted it in 2016. And it has taken years since to analyze the black, pitch-like coating still stuck to its hull planks. That coating turned out to hold two separate stories at once. A rare waterproofing formula named in ancient texts but almost never confirmed physically. And a chemical fingerprint of where the ship traveled for repairs across its working life. Today you get what researchers actually found baked into that coating. The ancient recipe one sample matches. How pollen trapped inside pitch can double as a travel log. And the honest limit on how far one wreck can speak for an entire shipbuilding tradition. The wreck is known by the name Ilovak Perzine 1. After the bay where it rests. It dates to the Roman Republican era. Likely the mid-2nd century BCE. Making it roughly 2,200 years old. Divers located it in 2016. But confirming its full story took a long research process afterward. Since a wreck buried in seabed sediment does not hand over its details in one visit. The ship was a working cargo vessel. Not a warship. Carrying timber logs and amphorae. The standard clay containers Romans used to move wine, oil, and other goods across the Mediterranean. Sediment covering the hull helped protect the wood and its coatings from the oxygen and organisms that normally break down organic material within decades. Which is why anything useful survived at all. What makes this wreck valuable to researchers is not that it sank. Since thousands of ships did. It is that the hull still carries physical evidence of how it was built and, more unusually, how it was repaired, multiple times, across a working life that spanned different regions of the Adriatic and wider Mediterranean before it went down for good. Most of the coating recovered from the hull was ordinary heated pine resin, commonly called pitch, the standard waterproofing Roman shipbuilders used across the empire. One sample, however, was different. A mixture of pitch and beeswax. Ancient Greek and Roman sources, including Pliny the Elder, described the substance by this kind of recipe under the name Zopissa. Valued because the wax made the mixture more flexible and easier to spread while still hot. Written descriptions of Zopissa have existed for roughly 2,000 years. Physical, chemically confirmed samples of the actual substance have not. Which is what makes this one patch of coating notable. Researchers analyzing the hull found the wax tar blend in a specific repaired section, not across the whole ship, suggesting it was applied during a particular repair rather than used as the vessel's original everyday coating. That distinction matters, because it points to shipbuilders having more than one waterproofing option available and choosing between them. Evidence of a more deliberate, varied material culture than a single generic recipe used everywhere the same way. Pitch is sticky by nature, and while it was being applied hot to the hull, it trapped whatever pollen was floating in the air nearby, sealed inside the coating. That pollen survived for over 2,000 years the same way the coating itself did. Researchers extracted and identified the trapped grains, then compared them against known plant distributions to narrow down what kind of landscape pitch was likely produced in each time it was applied. The pollen recovered pointed to more than one environment. Forests of holly oak and pine typical of Mediterranean and Adriatic coastlines. Alongside martorell, a Mediterranean shrubland where olive and hazel grow. Different coating layers carried different pollen signatures. consistent with repairs happening in different places over the ship's lifetime rather than all at once in a single shipyard. This is the part of the study that turns a hull into a kind of record. Without a single written log surviving, researchers used trapped plant material to reconstruct a rough map of where a 2,000-year-old ship likely stopped for maintenance. The Zopissa sample is one patch on one ship. Most of the hull was coated in ordinary pitch, so this find does not show that Roman shipbuilders regularly used the wax tar blend. Only that the option existed and was used at least once on this vessel. Generalizing from a single confirmed sample to broader Roman shipbuilding practice would overstate the evidence. The pollen analysis has its own limits. It identifies the type of landscape the raw pitch likely came from, such as pine forest or shrubland, not an exact town, date, or shipyard. The method also assumes that Mediterranean vegetation patterns from 2,200 years ago resemble modern reference data closely enough to compare against. A reasonable working assumption, but not something that can be independently verified for that exact period. And this remains one wreck. Ships built in different regions, decades apart, could easily have followed different repair habits entirely. What researchers have is strong physical evidence for what happened to this specific ship, carefully reconstructed. What they do not have is proof that this ship's story was the typical one. Recap: a 2,200-year-old Roman cargo ship recovered off Croatia still carries its original hull coatings, mostly ordinary pine pitch, but with one section made from a wax tar blend ancient writers named Zopissa and described for centuries without a confirmed physical match. Pollen trapped in the coating layers points to repairs sourced from at least two different kinds of Mediterranean landscape, letting researchers sketch a rough travel history for a ship with no surviving written record. Signal or noise? Signal. With the scope kept honest, the chemistry is measured. The pollen identification is a peer-reviewed technique with a real track record. And matching a physical sample to a 2,000-year-old written description is a genuine confirmation, not a guess. Where this stays a single data point is in how far it generalizes. One ship, one Zopissa patch, one set of repair stops. It tells you precisely what happened to this vessel. And it should not be read as the default story for how every Roman ship of its era was built or repaired. Subscribe for the discoveries that separate what the evidence actually proves from what it merely suggests. Signal from the noise. Every week,